She returned every gift he ever bought her. The first thing Mara returned was the diamond necklace. She placed it on Daniel's desk without opening the velvet box. Then came the gold watch, the pearl earrings, the leather handbag from Rome, the red coat he had surprised her with on their 5th anniversary. One by one, she emptied 7 years of marriage onto the polished oak surface. Outside the glass office, conversations faded. People slowed as they walked past. Nobody pretended not to watch. Daniel looked at the gifts. Then at the wedding ring, she finally slipped from her finger. That one held his attention longest. "There are 4 more boxes downstairs," Mara said. "What did you pack?" "Everything. The books, if you bought them, the piano." It was delivered to the house this morning. Something moved across his face. Not anger, pain. Small enough that anyone else would have missed it. Mara didn't. She ignored it. "I'll have someone bring the boxes up." "Do that." Silence settled between them. 7 years together, and silence had become the language they spoke most fluently. "I thought you'd ask why," Mara said. "I know why. Do you? You've been unhappy for a long time." The calmness in his voice irritated her. She had spent the entire drive rehearsing this conversation. She expected denial, maybe even pleading. Instead, Daniel looked like a man standing in the rain without bothering to search for shelter. "You always reduce everything to one sentence. What would you like me to say?" "I'd like you to fight." His eyes met hers. "I've been trying," Mara laughed. "No, I have." "When?" Daniel leaned back slowly. "When I asked if we could spend our anniversary away from the city. You cancelled it. A supplier's factory caught fire. You still cancelled. I asked again 2 months later. You were answering emails during dinner." "I shouldn't have." "No, you deserved better." She stared at him. That wasn't what she wanted. She wanted resistance, not agreement. She folded her arms. "You bought flowers." "Yes. For 2 weeks." "I know. You came home early." "I did. For 1 month." "I know. And then work became important again." Daniel looked down briefly. The contract nearly collapsed. It always nearly collapsed. "I was trying to keep the company alive. I was trying to keep the marriage alive." Neither spoke. Outside, someone walked past carrying files, then quickly disappeared after noticing the tension. Daniel broke the silence. "I suggested counseling. You left the number on the kitchen counter. I wasn't sure how to ask. You could have spoken." "I know. I needed my husband." "I know. I didn't need another expensive apology." His gaze shifted to the necklace. "I wasn't apologizing." "What was it?" "I remembered you stopping outside the jewelry shop." She shook her head. "There." "What?" "You still don't understand." "What don't I understand?" "I wanted you beside me." She looked at the gifts. "You kept trying to stand beside expensive things instead." Daniel closed his eyes for only a second. When he opened them, they looked tired. "I failed you." The admission should have satisfied her. Instead, it made her angrier, because it sounded like acceptance, not determination. "You've already signed the papers, haven't you?" He opened the top drawer, removed the divorce documents. His signature already sat on the final page. Mara felt something inside her drop. She had filed. She had moved out. She had told everyone she was done. Still, some stubborn, foolish part of her believed Daniel would refuse. Not legally, emotionally. She imagined him arriving at her sister's apartment one night. She imagined him saying, "I know I failed you, but don't leave." Instead, he had signed. "So that's it." He looked at her. "You asked for a divorce. I wanted you to stop me. I tried before you asked." The sentence lingered. Mara looked away first. "Too late." "Yes." He didn't argue. didn't insist she was wrong, didn't defend himself. That hurt more than if he had shouted. She picked up the wedding ring, held it between 2 fingers. "I don't want anything that reminds me of this marriage." She let it fall onto the desk. The sound echoed through the office. Daniel stared at it. His jaw tightened. "You returned the piano. I returned everything. You didn't have to. I wanted a clean break." He looked at the ring for several seconds, then quietly said, "Not everything meant the same thing." She almost asked what he meant. Almost. Instead, she turned toward the door. "Mara." She stopped. It was the first time he'd spoken her name since she entered. She waited. The silence stretched. Finally, he said, "I hope you find what you're looking for." She smiled without humor. "I already have." Daniel understood immediately. He didn't ask the name. He didn't need to. For months he had watched Adrian become part of conversations where he didn't belong. Messages arriving late at night. Lunches that slowly became routine. Long phone calls Mara described as harmless. He had asked once, only once, "Is there something you're not telling me?" She became furious, accused him of distrusting her, of trying to control her friendships. He never asked again, not because the suspicion disappeared, because he had already seen the answer in the way she defended another man more fiercely than she defended their marriage. Now she looked at him. "I'm leaving because this marriage stopped feeling like home." Daniel nodded. "I know." She waited for him to say more. He didn't. She walked out. By evening, everyone had heard the story. Mara returned every gift Daniel had ever bought her. People built their own explanations. He must have cheated. He worked too much. He neglected her. He probably thought money could replace affection. Nobody asked Mara directly. Her expression answered enough. She didn't correct a single rumor. Not because they were true, because they were close enough to how she had felt. 3 months later, the divorce became final. That night, Adrian took her to dinner. No expensive restaurant, just a quiet place overlooking the river. He handed her a small bunch of wildflowers. "I thought you'd be tired of jewelry," she laughed. "You know me too well. I've spent 2 years learning." He had. Adrian noticed things Daniel often missed. He remembered birthdays. He sent messages during the day. He listened without trying to solve every problem. He had been there during the final year of her marriage. Always available, always patient, always understanding. At least, that was how it seemed. "You look guilty," Adrian said. "I expected to feel happier. You spent 7 years with him." "I know. You don't stop loving someone because lawyers say you're divorced." She looked at him. "Aren't you jealous?" "No." He smiled gently. "I've waited this long. I can wait a little longer." For the first time in months, Mara believed she had finally chosen the man who understood her. She had no way of knowing that the hardest lessons of her life had only just begun. The first 6 months with Adrian felt effortless. That frightened Mara more than it comforted her. Nothing seemed difficult. He remembered the little things Daniel often forgot. He called during lunch, simply to ask whether she had eaten. He left handwritten notes inside her sketchbooks. When she worked late at the studio, he arrived with coffee instead of asking when she would be home. He noticed when she changed her perfume. He remembered the name of her childhood dog. He listened without reaching for a solution. For the first time in years, Mara felt heard, not managed, not provided for. He simply seemed present. Her sister, Celia, adored him. "I've never seen you laugh this much. I didn't realize I'd stopped." "You deserved this years ago." Mara believed that too. Whenever guilt crept in, Adrian gently pushed it away. "You mourn a marriage while you're still inside it. I know. You stayed longer than most people would have. I tried. I know. Unlike Daniel, Adrian always seemed to know exactly what to say. Daniel disappeared completely. No messages, no accidental meetings, no birthday greetings, nothing. At first, Mara found the silence insulting, then confusing, then strangely painful. One evening she asked Celia, "Has he said anything about me?" "He asked whether your studio was doing well." "That's all. What else should he ask?" "I don't know." Celia watched her carefully. "I thought you wanted distance." "I do," she answered too quickly. 8 months after the divorce, Adrian suggested they move in together. "I already spend more nights here than at my apartment." He smiled. "This place feels like ours anyway." Mara hesitated. "I don't want people saying I rushed." "They already are," she laughed. "They really are. They'll stop. When? When they find someone else to gossip about." So she moved in. The apartment was warm, bright, and filled with books. For the first time since the divorce, she stopped feeling like she was living out of boxes. She began believing she had finally found peace. Small things changed first, so gradually she almost missed them. One Saturday morning, Adrian asked casually, "Has Daniel transferred your settlement yet?" "I didn't take one." He looked up from his coffee. "You mean, not yet?" "I mean never." He laughed, then realized she wasn't joking. "You walked away with nothing." "I kept my business." "The company?" "No." "The house?" "No." "The investments?" "No." He stared at her. "Why?" "I didn't want his money." "You were married for 7 years." "I know." "You helped build his company." "I know." "You were entitled to half." "I didn't want it." He leaned back slowly. "I don't understand." "You don't have to." "No." He frowned. "I really do." She smiled. "It wasn't about money." His face became unreadable. "Maybe not to you." Nothing dramatic happened after that conversation. That was why Mara didn't notice the shift immediately. Adrian still kissed her goodbye every morning, still asked about work, still smiled. But the warmth became measured. He began mentioning expenses, rent, future plans, property, retirement, things he had never seemed interested in before. When Mara suggested renovating the studio, he asked, "With what money?" She laughed. "I'll save. That'll take years." "So, you could have had financial security." "I didn't want Daniel paying for the rest of my life." Adrian shook his head. "Sometimes pride is expensive." She let the remark pass. One evening they attended a charity dinner. Someone recognized Mara. "Weren't you married to Daniel Ashcroft?" "I was. He built an incredible company." "He did." The woman smiled politely. "I heard you received a generous settlement." Before Mara could answer, Adrian did. "She didn't take anything." The woman's smile disappeared. "Oh." The conversation ended soon afterward. Driving home, Mara asked, "Why did you answer for me? You weren't saying anything." "I would have. I saved you the awkward explanation." She looked out the window. It didn't feel like he had saved her. It felt like he had been embarrassed by her answer. The arguments arrived quietly, not about love, about practicality. "You should have protected yourself." "I did." "No. You protected him. I protected my peace. You left with neither." Mara stared at him. "Is that what you think?" "I think." He hesitated. "I think emotions make people foolish." She smiled sadly. "I suppose they do." A year after moving in together, Adrian stopped asking about her paintings, stopped coming to the studio, stopped leaving notes, stopped calling during lunch. One afternoon she asked, "Are we all right?" He didn't answer immediately. "I've been thinking." "About?" "Our future." She smiled. "So have I." "I don't think we want the same future." The sentence landed gently, too gently. What changed? He looked away. I've changed. No. She shook her head. You changed after you realized I wasn't wealthy. His silence answered before his words did. That's unfair, is it? I never said money didn't matter. You never said it mattered this much. He rubbed his forehead. I've worked hard my whole life. So have I. I want stability. I thought that's what we had. I thought so too. Mara felt something inside her begin to collapse. Not because he wanted to leave, because she suddenly understood that he'd been quietly leaving for months. You loved the life you thought we'd have. He didn't deny it. I loved you. I believe you. But not enough. He looked at her sadly. Maybe not. He helped carry her boxes downstairs. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. She had once packed boxes to leave Daniel. Now someone else was helping her leave. At the car, Adrian hesitated. I never meant to hurt you. I know. I did love you. I know. He looked relieved. Then he said the sentence she remembered for years. You should have taken the settlement. Mara closed the car door without answering. She drove away. Halfway home, she had to pull onto the roadside because she could no longer see through her tears. 3 weeks later, Celia arrived with groceries. You've barely eaten. I'm fine. No, you're surviving. They unpacked the bags together. After a while, Celia said quietly, I saw Daniel. Mara stopped moving. Oh, he asked whether you were doing all right. She waited. He didn't ask why Adrian left. No, he didn't ask for details. No. What did he say? Celia smiled sadly. He just said, she hesitated. Tell her I hope she remembers she's stronger than she thinks she is. Mara looked away quickly. He always says the right thing after it's too late. Celia didn't answer, because for the first time, she wasn't sure that was true anymore. Months passed. Life settled again. Mara rebuilt her routine. Studio, friends, church, family dinners. From the outside, she seemed recovered. Inside, something had changed. She caught herself comparing men without meaning to, not in the way she once had. She no longer asked, who makes me feel happier? Instead, she found herself wondering, who stays when life becomes inconvenient? The question frightened her. Because she already knew one answer, she simply wasn't ready to admit whose name belonged to it. 2 years after Adrian left, Mara met Julian. He wasn't charming. That was what she liked about him. He never tried to impress her. He owned a small accounting firm, preferred quiet restaurants to expensive ones, and apologized whenever he forgot something instead of pretending he hadn't. For the first time since the divorce, Mara chose carefully. There were no secret lunches, no emotional affair disguised as friendship. She refused to let another relationship begin before the previous one had completely left her heart. Julian respected that. For almost a year, she believed she had finally found the kind of love that arrived without confusion. Then ordinary life began. And ordinary life had a way of exposing people. One Saturday morning, Julian walked into the kitchen, holding 3 coffee mugs. Mara, she looked up. What? You've left cups everywhere again. She blinked. So, there are cups in the bedroom, the studio, and the bathroom. I'll get them. You said that yesterday. She laughed. It's only cups. It isn't about the cups. She frowned. Then what is it about? You never finish little things. The sentence stayed with her, not because it was cruel, because she'd heard something similar before. Years earlier, Daniel had walked through the house, collecting half-empty mugs. She used to tease him. You'll make a wonderful housekeeper if engineering fails. He'd smiled. I know where they all are. She'd never once heard him complain. A month later, she forgot to pay the electricity bill. The lights went out halfway through dinner. Julian sighed. Mara, I forgot. You always forget. I'll pay it. That's not the point. She folded her arms. Then what's the point? I don't want to spend my life reminding another adult to do basic things. She became defensive immediately. I run a business. You run your business brilliantly. He looked at her gently. You just don't run everyday life very well. She slept badly that night, not because Julian had been harsh, because she realized Daniel had quietly been paying every utility bill for 7 years. She had never even known which accounts they came from. The discoveries kept coming, not all at once, quietly, like old photographs falling from books she hadn't opened in years. One afternoon she met Daniel's former assistant at a gallery. The woman smiled warmly. I still remember your first exhibition. Mara returned the smile. So do I. Daniel nearly missed the board meeting that morning. She frowned. What? He delayed the meeting for almost an hour because you were nervous. I thought... She stopped. She had always believed he'd attended only the opening. He wanted to stay longer. The assistant laughed. He asked me 3 times whether he could cancel the meeting completely. Mara stared at her. He never told me. He didn't think it mattered. She drove home in silence. That evening, she remembered accusing Daniel of caring more about investors than her work. He hadn't defended himself. He'd simply apologized for leaving early. 3 weeks later, she visited her mother. During lunch, her mother said casually, I found one of Daniel's old receipts. What receipt? The hospital. Mara looked up. What hospital? The year I had pneumonia. I remember. He insisted on paying for the private room. Mara frowned. I thought Dad did. Her mother looked confused. No. She wiped her hands on a towel. Your father couldn't afford it. Mara felt something shift. Why didn't anyone tell me? Daniel asked us not to. Why? He said you'd refuse if you knew. Mara looked out the window. Another piece. Another thing she had never counted. Life with Julian became harder, not because either of them were bad people, because they loved differently. When Mara became overwhelmed, she needed silence. Julian needed conversation. When she forgot appointments, he saw irresponsibility. Daniel had simply added them to his own calendar. When she worked through the night, Julian complained she was neglecting the relationship. Daniel used to leave food outside her studio door. She caught herself thinking about Daniel too often. That frightened her. Not because she missed him, because she was beginning to see him more honestly. He hadn't accepted everything. He complained about her clutter. He teased her terrible sense of direction. He became frustrated when she left projects unfinished. But instead of trying to change those things, he quietly adjusted around them. At the time, she mistook that for emotional distance. Now she wondered whether it had simply been love. Julian noticed. You're somewhere else. I'm listening. No. He looked at her carefully. You're comparing me. Her heart stopped. I'm not. You are. Silence. Finally he asked, Is it your ex-husband? She looked away. That answered enough. Julian nodded slowly. I can't compete with a man you've spent years rewriting. I'm not rewriting him. Aren't you? He smiled sadly. When we met, he was the husband who never showed up. He held her gaze. Now every story somehow ends with him quietly doing the right thing. She opened her mouth, closed it again, because he wasn't entirely wrong. The relationship ended 3 months later. There was no shouting, no betrayal, just exhaustion. Julian packed the last box into her car. I think you loved Daniel in a language neither of you understood. She stared at him. And I think, he smiled kindly, you only learned to translate it after losing him. She drove home crying. Not because she'd lost Julian, because she knew he was right. The years continued moving. The revelations continued arriving. Never dramatically, never together. Daniel's former business partner told her he'd rejected a permanent transfer overseas because she had just opened her design studio. I thought he didn't get the promotion. He turned it down. He told me he didn't want you to feel guilty. Months later, she met an elderly waiter from the restaurant where she and Daniel celebrated anniversaries. "I haven't seen your husband in years. We're divorced." The man looked genuinely saddened. He always booked the corner table. Mara smiled faintly. "I know. He'd arrive 40 minutes early." Her smile disappeared. "What?" "He always worried traffic would make him late." She remembered only the anniversaries he had actually missed. She had forgotten the many he hadn't. Memory, she realized, was selective. Pain selected more aggressively than gratitude. One rainy afternoon, she cleaned the storage room behind her studio. Inside an old box, she found a folded card. "Marriage Counselors of Westbridge." Daniel's handwriting covered the back. "Thursday, 7 p.m. If you don't want to go, I'll understand. I just don't know what else to try anymore." She sat on the floor for nearly an hour. She remembered finding the card years earlier. She hadn't even finished reading it. She'd thrown it into a drawer, convinced counseling was another task he'd delegated instead of a conversation he should have started. Now she noticed something she'd missed. The ink on the final sentence had smudged, as though he'd hesitated while writing it, or rewritten it more than once. That night she admitted something to herself she had spent years resisting. Daniel had failed her. He had buried himself in work. He had hidden behind responsibility. He had believed solving problems was the same as nurturing a marriage. Those things were true. But another truth had been quietly waiting beside them all along. He had tried. Not enough. Not perfectly. Not in the language she needed, but genuinely. And she had stopped looking before he had stopped reaching. The realization did not excuse either of them. It only made the past unbearably human. 7 years had passed since the divorce. One evening, Celia called. "I saw Daniel." Mara smiled before she realized she was smiling. "How is he?" "He looks peaceful." The word lingered after the call ended. Peaceful. Mara looked around her apartment. She had rebuilt her business, made new friends, recovered from 2 failed relationships, learned to live alone. Yet one question refused to leave her. Not whether Daniel still loved her. Whether she had understood his love only after it was too late. For the first time since the divorce, she wanted the answer more than she feared it. Mara saw Daniel again 8 years after she left him. Not at a funeral, not at a charity dinner, not by accident. She went looking for him. She had delayed it for almost a year after speaking to Celia. Every month, she found another excuse. He deserves peace. He's probably moved on. What if he hates me? What if he doesn't? The last question frightened her more. Because if there was still love between them, she would have to face everything she had done with it. She found him where she least expected. Not in the company headquarters. He had stepped down as managing director 3 years earlier. Not because the business had failed, because, according to an old colleague, Daniel finally learned that there are things money can never buy back. He now taught engineering part-time at a university and consulted only when he wanted to. His office overlooked a courtyard filled with old oak trees. It was quieter than any place Mara had ever associated with him. She waited until his final lecture ended, and students drifted out laughing. Daniel walked behind them, carrying a stack of papers. His hair had begun to grey around the temples. He looked older, softer. He also looked lighter than she remembered. He saw her immediately. For a second, neither of them moved. Then he smiled. It wasn't the smile of a man welcoming lost love. It was the smile reserved for someone who had once mattered deeply. Mara. Hello, Daniel. I wasn't expecting you. I know. He glanced at his office. Would you like some coffee? She almost cried. After everything, he was still kind. They sat in silence for several minutes. The room overlooked students crossing the courtyard. Life continued outside, while 8 years quietly sat between them. Daniel poured coffee. You still take 1 sugar? She looked up. You remembered? I remember a great many things. Neither smiled. Finally, Mara said, I've spent years wanting to say thank you. He looked at her. For what? For trying. He didn't answer. I know about the promotion. His expression didn't change. The counseling. Silence. My mother's hospital bills. Another silence. The lease negotiations. He looked out the window. Celia talks too much. It wasn't just Celia. She shook her head. It came in pieces. Life usually does. She laughed softly. That's exactly what happened. She looked at him. For years, I kept discovering another thing you'd done. Daniel rested his cup on the desk. I wasn't keeping score. I know. I wasn't trying to earn gratitude. I know. I was just your husband. Her eyes filled. You were. She took a slow breath. I've apologized to myself 1,000 times. Daniel looked at her gently. You don't owe yourself an apology. I owe you one. He said nothing. I thought you didn't love me. I know. I thought gifts were replacing affection. I know. I thought work always came first. He nodded. Sometimes it did. She blinked. You admit that? I've never denied it. He smiled sadly. I really did miss anniversaries. I know. I really did bury myself in work. I know. I wasn't the husband you needed. You were trying. Not well enough. The honesty almost broke her. Neither of them needed to defend themselves anymore. Time had stripped away pride. Only truth remained. Mara looked down at her hands. I've loved other people since then. Daniel nodded once. I know. I thought I'd stop comparing. You didn't. She smiled through tears. No. She met his eyes. The problem was never that they weren't you. It was? They loved the parts of me that were easy. Daniel stayed silent. You loved all the inconvenient parts too. A faint smile crossed his face. You left coffee cups everywhere. She laughed. I still do. You forgot birthdays. I know. You could never decide what to eat. I know. You abandoned projects halfway through because another idea excited you. I know. You apologized for crying. The smile disappeared. I wish I'd stopped you from doing that. Her tears fell. I kept thinking nobody else would tolerate me. Daniel looked at her for a long time. I never tolerated you. She frowned. I simply loved you. The room grew quiet again. Finally, Mara whispered, I still love you. Daniel closed his eyes. Only for a moment. When he opened them, the warmth was still there. So was something deeper. Pain that had healed without disappearing. I know. She took a breath. I don't expect you to answer. I know. She struggled to continue. I needed you to know the truth. Daniel nodded. Thank you. She looked at him. Hope rose despite herself. It was tiny, dangerous. I've spent years wondering, her voice trembled, whether we were given the right person at the wrong time. Daniel looked down at his wedding band. She froze. He noticed. I never remarried. Relief flooded her before she could stop it. Then came shame. She had no right to feel relieved. So, she hesitated. Is there still a chance? Daniel didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stood and walked to the window. The courtyard below had emptied. Only a few students remained. When he finally spoke, his voice was almost gentle. Do you remember the night you kissed Adrian? Her heart stopped. She had never told him. I came home early. He didn't turn around. You were standing outside the apartment building. Mara couldn't breathe. You kissed him. Silence. I sat in my car for almost an hour. Daniel's voice remained calm. I kept asking myself whether I'd imagined it. He looked back at her. The next morning, I bought your birthday watch. Fresh tears rolled down her face. I know that sounds ridiculous now. He smiled sadly. I thought if I loved you better. His voice broke for the first time. You might choose me again. Mara covered her mouth. I should have told you. You didn't have to. I was confused. You'd already chosen. She shook her head desperately. No. You defended him long before you defended us. I didn't realize. I know. I never slept with him before the divorce. I believe you. Then, he gently interrupted. Mara, she fell silent. I wasn't destroyed because you loved someone else. He swallowed. I was destroyed because while I was still trying to save our marriage, he looked at her with quiet honesty. Your heart had already started leaving. The words settled between them. Not angry, simply true. I've forgiven you. She looked up, completely. Hope flickered again. Then he continued. But forgiveness isn't the same as trust. The hope disappeared. I know. For years. Daniel smiled sadly. Every time I thought about trying again. He shook his head. I remembered sitting in that car. She closed her eyes. I can't unknow that day. Neither could she. She stood slowly. So this is goodbye. I think we already said goodbye years ago. She nodded. I was just late accepting it. Daniel walked her to the door. Before she left, she turned back. Can I ask one last question? Of course. When I returned every gift, she smiled sadly. Why did you keep them? He looked at her for a long moment. Because they weren't gifts. She frowned. They were pieces of the life I thought we'd grow old inside. She felt her throat tighten. I couldn't throw that away. And now? He smiled. I don't need the things anymore. What changed? I finally accepted that memories don't live inside objects. He looked at her gently. They live inside people. 3 months later, Mara received a small parcel. Inside was her wedding ring. Nothing else. No letter, no explanation. Only the ring. She held it in her palm for a long time. Then she placed it inside the same wooden box where she kept Ruth's old carving knife, her father's watch, and the sketchbook from her first exhibition. Not because she hoped Daniel would come back, but because some things deserved to be remembered honestly. Years earlier, she had returned every gift Daniel ever bought her because she believed they represented everything he had failed to give. Time had taught her otherwise. The greatest gifts had never been wrapped. They were the mornings he quietly adjusted his life around hers. The opportunities he declined without seeking praise. The ordinary inconveniences he carried because he loved her. His failures had been real. So had hers. But there was one gift she could never return. The years a good man spent trying, imperfectly and sincerely, to build a life with the woman he believed would grow old beside him. She understood that only after those years were gone, and some understandings, no matter how true, arrive too late to become another beginning.
If this story stayed with you until the very end, thank you, truly. I write these stories because I'm fascinated by people, the choices they make, the mistakes they regret, the love they never expected, and the moments that change everything. Every character, every plot twist, every emotional turn, and every ending begins as a blank page before it's carefully written into the story you've just experienced. While AI-assisted narration and visuals help bring these stories to life, the stories themselves are originally written by me, from the first idea to the final twist. If you enjoyed this one, I'd be grateful if you liked the video, subscribed to the channel, shared it with someone who loves emotional stories, and turned on the notification bell. It really helps me keep creating more stories for you. Until our next journey, Jetta Veline.